Hello everyone! Today I'll show you how to install and set up the Sophos NDR sensor on VMware ESXi. Once set up, Sophos NDR reports all detection data to the Threat Analysis Center in Sophos Central by using a SPAN port to scan traffic generated from your ESXi environment. Today, I'll show you how to set up the NDR integration in Sophos Central, create a SPAN port to mirror traffic, and download and deploy the NDR OVA file. Lastly, I'll show you how to access the Sophos Appliance Manager to manage and troubleshoot the VM. Before starting, you need a Sophos Network Detection and Response Integration License Pack, and ensure that you're running ESXi 6.7, Update 3, or later. Note that we have separate resources for other supported hypervisors linked in the description. Next, ensure you've enabled HTTPS access out of the target network to Sophos Central, as there is no web inspection or proxy on the connection to Central. Lastly, the physical and/or virtual switches must be configured to allow SPAN ports. For further information regarding the specific CPU requirements and appliance sizing guidelines, refer to the documentation linked in the video description. Now, let's get started. In Sophos Central, go to the Threat Analysis Center and open the Integrations Marketplace. Next, select Sophos NDR. Then click Add Configuration. Here, you'll populate the settings and information to create an OVA file that can be downloaded and deployed in a hypervisor. Enter a name for the appliance. The description is optional. Then, create a new appliance to collect NDR logs by clicking Create New Appliance. Enter a name and, optionally, a description. Note that the name must be unique. Then, specify which virtual platform is being used. In this case, it's VMware. Now, I'll set up the management network port for the appliance. Here, you can use DHCP or manually specify the IP address and network configuration, which is what I'll do. I'll select IPv4 as the version and fill in the relevant IP address information. Lastly, define any domains or protocols that should be excluded from detections. You can set up your exclusions later, but you must enter the list name now. Note that the list name must be unique for each NDR appliance. Enter a name, then specify any domains and protocols to be excluded. Once you're done, scroll back up and click Save. A pop-up will appear displaying the newly created appliance credentials. Take note of these now, as you can't retrieve them later. Now, you'll see the newly created integration in the list. At this point, an OVA virtual appliance file will be created for you to deploy in ESXi. This can take a little while to generate. So, while I wait for the OVA file, I'll set up virtual networking in the ESXi environment. For the NDR appliance to monitor network traffic, you need to set up port mirroring using a SPAN port. This mirrors traffic generated from your host locally and routes it to the Sophos NDR appliance for analysis. Open the Networking section and ensure you're in the Port Groups tab. Click Add Port Group and enter a name. The VLAN ID must be set to 4095. This isn't a valid VLAN, but it tells the virtual switch that all traffic will be mirrored. Select the vSwitch to mirror traffic from. This is where all of your devices reside that you want to monitor. Expand Security and choose Accept for promiscuous mode. Then, click Add. Now I have a SPAN port to forward virtual internal network traffic. Next, you can create or select another virtual switch to monitor external network traffic. In this case, I'll add a new one. Go to the Virtual Switches tab and add a standard virtual switch. Enter a name. Then select a network card for uplink. Finish by clicking Add, and there's the new virtual switch. Now create another SPAN port to mirror the traffic generated on this vSwitch. Go back to Port Groups and click Add Port Group. I'll call this one SPAN 2. Set the VLAN ID to 4095 again. Select the new vSwitch. And once again under Security, accept promiscuous mode. Then click Add. Now you'll see both SPAN ports. SPAN 1 monitors traffic inside the ESXi host, and SPAN 2 monitors external traffic. You're now ready to deploy the VM. Head back to Sophos Central. The last step will be to download and deploy the NDR Appliance OVA file. click the Refresh button, then click the ellipsis on the right of the appliance. The appliance is ready once the Download Image option is visible. Click this to download the OVA. Note that the OVA file is verified with Sophos Central, so it can only be used once. You must create a new OVA file if you wish to deploy to a new VM. For more information, check the documentation linked in the description. Return to the ESXi host and go to Virtual Machines. Click Create Register VM. Next, choose Deploy a virtual machine from an OVF or OVA file. Select the OVA file you just downloaded. Then enter a name for the VM. In the storage options, set the storage type to Standard, then specify the data store where the VM will live. Next, in Network Mappings, select the 2 SPAN ports you just created. Syslog isn't required for Sophos NDR, only third-party integrations. You can select any port group as a placeholder and disconnect it later in the VM settings. However, if you plan to set up a third-party integration that also uses the NDR appliance, select the port that will receive syslog data from that integration. Refer to the linked documentation for further information. Next, choose the appropriate management interface. If you selected DHCP during setup, make sure the VM can get an IP address via DHCP. Set disk provisioning to thin. Note that if using both SPAN ports, you will need to give the VM 8 CPU cores instead of the default 4. This can be done by first unchecking Power On automatically, and then modifying the VM settings later. Click Next and verify the settings that have been configured. Then click Finish. The VM will start importing. This can take up to 10 minutes based on the resources you've allocated and the internet connection at your site. Ensure that you don't interrupt this process. Once the VM has successfully imported, select the VM and click on Actions. Then Edit Settings. The number of CPU cores can now be changed, and I can disconnect syslog as well. Now open the VM and click Power On. When opening the VM, you'll see the initial boot process, and the VM will connect to Sophos Central. This may take 5 to 10 minutes to complete. Next, you'll see the console UI and the startup checklist. And finally, you'll get a confirmation that the initial sensor setup is complete. Once the connection to Sophos Central is established, you'll see the status updates to Connected. Return to Sophos Central and view the new appliance. Under Integrations, go to Configured and open the Integration Appliances tab. If you have a lot of integrations, you can quickly search for the one you want. And here, you see the appliance is connected and healthy. If it's not connected, check that the HTTPS traffic is permitted to reach Sophos Central as mentioned in the prerequisites. Lastly, I'll show you how to access the Sophos Appliance Manager, which lets you access and troubleshoot Sophos virtual appliances. Click the ellipsis and go to Open Appliance Manager. Click Open and this will launch a new browser tab. Allow the connection and log in with the credentials you saved earlier when creating the NDR appliance. Here you can see information about the VM. In the upper right, the sensor status is shown and you can see it's connected to Central. Open the NDR tab to monitor and manage Sophos NDR. Here you can see the network traffic flowing to the appliance. If you want, you can also run queries to simulate the traffic. Go to NDR Query, click Example Queries. I'll try viewing the flow record count. Copy this in and run the query. And as another example, I'll try viewing the top downloads like so. For more information about the Sophos Appliance Manager, refer to our linked documentation. As a final note, we recommend that you set up the investigation console in Sophos Central so you can access all the data on your NDR appliances, not just the data that goes into our data lake. This is valuable information you can use for threat hunting. Refer to the linked resources for further information. And that completes the deployment of Sophos NDR on ESXi. I hope you found this useful. Relevant documentation for this tech vid is linked in the description. Go to the Sophos community to engage with Sophos experts and have your questions answered. And visit Sophos TechVids to learn more helpful tips and get the most out of your products. Thanks for watching.